The air in Studio 7 was thick with the manufactured calm of a live television debate, a deceptive quiet before the inevitable storm. For those of us who live for these moments, who crave the raw, unscripted clash of ideas, this was the calm before the reckoning. If you're ready to dive into a story where composure meets condescension and a single line can shatter an entire narrative, then you're in the right place. Before we plunge into the heart of this electrifying showdown, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement fuels these stories, and trust us, this one is worth every click. The studio lights, usually a harsh, unyielding glare, dimmed ever so slightly, casting long, dramatic shadows as the host, a man whose voice was as predictable as the sunrise, welcomed both guests. His tone, a practiced blend of neutrality and polite enthusiasm, did little to mask the palpable tension already simmering beneath the surface. On one side of the glossy, highly polished table sat Karoline Levitt, a figure of poised stillness. Her notes, meticulously prepared, lay untouched before her, a testament to a mind that didn't need a script to command attention. Her eyes, however, were anything but still. They were laser-focused, unwavering, fixed across the table at Jessica Tarve. Jessica, a veteran of these televised skirmishes, adjusted her designer glasses with a subtle, almost imperceptible movement and offered a practiced half-smile. It was the kind of smile that didn't invite connection, but rather declared, without uttering a single word, "I know better than you. I've been here. You haven't." It didn't take long. The polite veneer, thin as it was, cracked and then shattered, the conversation going from civil to nuclear in a heartbeat. Jessica leaned in, her posture a subtle assertion of dominance, her voice, when it came, lined with a syrupy condescension that could curdle milk. "Look, I appreciate your enthusiasm, Karoline," she began, drawing out the younger woman's name with an exaggerated slowness, like a schoolteacher correcting a particularly slow student. "But there's a difference between passion and naivete." The word hung in the air, a deliberate, calculated insult. The room stilled. The very molecules of oxygen seemed to hold their breath. The host, caught in the sudden, deafening silence, blinked, his eyes darting between the two women. He looked unsure whether to interrupt, to throw a lifeline, or simply to let the impending conflagration burn. Karoline, however, didn't flinch. Not a muscle twitched. Instead, she offered a polite, almost serene smile, a gesture that seemed to defy the gravity of the moment. Then, with a casualness that bordered on theatrical, she reached for her water glass, took a slow, deliberate sip, and set it back down. "Well," Karoline began, her tone cool, steady, and utterly unruffled, cutting through the silence like a surgeon's scalpel. "I guess the question is, are you calling me naive now, or is this more of a throwback, like, dial-up internet?" The silence that followed was not just silence, it was volcanic. It was the kind of silence that screams louder than any shout, a vacuum where a smug smirk had once been. Jessica's practiced confidence visibly faltered, her carefully constructed facade cracking. A few staffers behind the camera, usually impassive, exchanged wide-eyed, incredulous glances. The host's mouth opened slightly, a silent O of astonishment, but no words, no sound dared to escape. Karoline, meanwhile, continued, her voice unwavering, a steady, calm current in the suddenly turbulent studio. "Because if we're throwing around outdated labels, maybe we should check what decade your arguments are from." The tension, taut as a violin string, snapped. It broke not with a shout or a gasp, but with nervous, almost bewildered laughter that rippled through the panel, quickly followed by a surge of genuine applause from the small live audience. Jessica's face flushed, not with anger, but with that tight, diplomatic smile politicians wear when they've been hit but absolutely cannot show pain. Karoline leaned back in her chair just slightly, her composure flawless. She didn't gloat, she didn't need to. The line had landed, and it echoed in the studio like a dropped mic, the sound of a paradigm shifting. Jessica shuffled in her seat, a telltale sign of discomfort, of a carefully constructed world suddenly off kilter.
The reverberations of Karoline's dial-up volley still hung in the air, a phantom echo of a mic drop that had left Jessica Tarve reeling. Jessica, a woman who had built a career on unshakable composure, now found herself visibly off balance. Her tight, diplomatic smile, a shield against all rhetorical assaults, seemed to be cracking at the edges. She shuffled in her seat, a telltale sign of discomfort. A veteran politician suddenly finding the ground beneath her feet less solid than she'd always assumed. She cleared her throat, a small, almost imperceptible sound, before launching her counteroffensive, a line she'd no doubt deployed countless times against younger, less seasoned opponents. "I've been in this game longer than you've been allowed to vote," she muttered, the words laced with an attempt to reassert hierarchical dominance, to dismiss Karoline as a mere novice. Karoline, however, was not to be dismissed. She simply tilted her head, a flash of something akin to a grin breaking through her serene expression. "Exactly," she said, her voice calm, almost conversational, yet carrying the weight of a profound truth. "That might be part of the problem." The simplicity of the retort was its genius. It wasn't an argument, it was an observation, delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who understood the game far better than her opponent gave her credit for. Jessica straightened in her seat, her jaw tightening. The condescension, for a fleeting moment, was gone, replaced with a raw, unaccustomed irritation. She wasn't used to being challenged so publicly, so effectively, especially not by someone who, in her mind, hadn't even reached 30. She gave a small, measured laugh, the kind used to mask a deeper vexation, a forced lightness that fooled no one. "I'm just saying," she started, her tone clipped now, devoid of its earlier syrupy sweetness. "Experience matters, and yes, maybe my ideas go back a few decades, but so do the ones that built this country." Karoline arched an eyebrow, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes. "You mean the same ones that built a $34 trillion national debt and a government so bloated it can't even pass a budget on time?" There it was again, that sharp, precise delivery. Karoline didn't rant, she didn't shout, she didn't even raise her voice. She just sliced, her words cutting through the carefully constructed rhetoric, exposing the uncomfortable truths beneath. Jessica's smile froze, a rictus of strained politeness. The audience murmured again, a low hum of agreement and surprise. The host, sensing the debate spiraling further from his control, leaned forward slightly, trying desperately to regain some semblance of order. "Let's focus on the issue," he offered, his voice a little too loud, a little too eager. "Social programs, are they being misused?" Jessica, recognizing the lifeline, jumped on it with the desperation of a drowning swimmer. "Of course not. These programs are safety nets for Americans in need, but people like Karoline want to gut them because they believe everything should be privatized." Karoline didn't look away, her gaze unwavering. "I believe in responsibility, Jessica, and I believe that when a system keeps people dependent instead of empowered, we have to question who it's really working for." Jessica scoffed, a dismissive sound, spoken like someone who's never had to worry about medical bills or rent. It was the classic personal attack, designed to invalidate an opponent's perspective by questioning their lived experience. But Karoline's voice didn't waver, didn't falter. "I grew up in a middle-class family in New Hampshire. My dad worked overtime. My mom packed lunches for 3 kids every morning. Don't assume you know my story just because I speak with confidence." A hush settled again, deeper this time, more profound. Jessica hesitated, her carefully laid trap springing back on her. She'd played the personal card too fast, too carelessly, and it had backfired spectacularly. Karoline's answer had hit the one nerve pundits feared most: authenticity. The host, seizing the opportunity to escape the escalating tension, cleared his throat. "Let's take a quick break," he said, his voice a little too shaky. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. Karoline sat back, calm as ever, while Jessica fidgeted with her pen, her earlier poise completely shattered. In that moment, the room wasn't just watching a debate, it was watching the balance of control shift, irrevocably. The cameras hadn't even cut to commercial yet, but the air in the studio had already changed. Jessica was visibly trying to recover, tapping her pen rhythmically, as if summoning a comeback. Karoline, meanwhile, sat still, controlled, deadly calm.
The break ended quickly. The host, visibly relieved, seized the opportunity to shift the topic, desperate to steer the conversation away from the generational chasm that had just opened on his stage. "Let's talk cultural values," he announced, his voice regaining a semblance of its usual composure. "There's growing debate about patriotism, education, and what values we should be instilling in the next generation." Jessica, still recalibrating, jumped in, seizing the familiar ground. "That's exactly why people like me speak up," she declared, her tone regaining some of its earlier authority. "Because what we're seeing is a wave of radicalism wrapped in a flag, pretending it's freedom." Karoline leaned forward slightly, her eyes sharp, unblinking. "And what you're promoting is institutionalism wrapped in academia, pretending it's wisdom." Jessica's mouth parted, slightly stunned. She wasn't used to that kind of rhetorical precision, that surgical strike against her carefully crafted arguments. Karoline didn't let up. "Let's talk values. You mock younger conservatives like we're clueless, like we just repeat talking points. But here's a truth bomb for you. We're the generation cleaning up the mess your policies left behind." Gasps, audible ones, rippled through the audience. Even the host blinked, caught off guard. Jessica laughed, but this one was hollow, brittle. "You think tweeting with hashtags is cleaning up anything?" Karoline smirked, a genuine, almost mischievous flash of humor. "Better than filing another report no one reads." The studio cracked, genuine laughter erupting, even from the crew members who usually maintain stoic professionalism. The host tried to regain his footing, but Karoline leaned in again, her voice dropping slightly, making the audience lean in with her. "You keep preaching from a stack of articles, but people like me, we've lived through the fallout. School lockdowns, economic freefall, cancel culture turned government-sanctioned censorship. We're not naive, Jessica. We're forged." That word hit. Forged. It hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Jessica took a breath, now blinking faster, her composure visibly fraying. "You talk like you've already saved the country." "No," Karoline replied calmly, her voice unwavering. "I talk like I've just started." That was it. The pivot, the shift in dominance wasn't subtle anymore. It was visceral, undeniable. Jessica glanced off camera, her eyes darting, seeking guidance, a lifeline. Her next line was coming, but it wouldn't matter. Karoline had already won the room and quite possibly the narrative. Jessica leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing, calculating. The condescension was gone now, replaced with something sharper, more primal, defensiveness. She wasn't used to being outmaneuvered, especially not by someone who, in her mind, hadn't paid her dues. "You think a few years of tweeting and talking points makes you a policymaker?" she said, her voice tight, strained. Karoline didn't blink. "No, but standing up for the people who are tired of being ignored does." Jessica fired back, her frustration mounting. "You speak for people like it's a brand. Populism isn't a personality trait, Karoline. It's a liability." Karoline smiled, but this time it wasn't kind. It was sharp, almost predatory. "You know what's really a liability? Pretending to be above it all while everything beneath you burns." The audience stirred again, murmurs filling the room. You could almost hear viewers at home pausing their remotes mid-scroll. Jessica's tone hardened, her voice laced with a desperate attempt at intellectual superiority. "You're reckless. You appeal to emotion, not reason. You don't understand the nuance of policy, the decades of negotiation, the institutional trust that's built over time." Karoline leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "And where did that get us, Jessica? $7 gas, open borders, and classrooms more focused on pronouns than performance." That one stung. Jessica opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For a split second, it looked like she might call for a break herself. Karoline pressed on, relentless. "I don't need institutional trust.
I need people to trust that someone, anyone, still has the spine to speak truth in a room full of rehearsed speeches. Even the host was silent now. His teleprompter might as well have gone dark. Jessica took a long sip of water, visibly trying to compose herself, her hand trembling slightly. It's dangerous the way you oversimplify everything. Karoline shrugged, a gesture of dismissive finality. It's dangerous how you complicate everything to avoid accountability. And that was it. Not a mic drug, because Karoline never raised her voice. She didn't perform. She executed. The generation gap wasn't just spoken about, it was lived, right there in front of the cameras. And for once, the older voice wasn't the one commanding the stage. The host shifted in his seat, eyes darting between Karoline and Jessica, as if silently pleading for a return to civility. But it was far too late for that. This wasn't just a debate anymore, it was a reckoning. Jessica adjusted her notes with shaky fingers, her earlier confidence shattered.
Jessica adjusted her notes with shaky fingers, her earlier confidence shattered, the debate having become a battlefield where she had been decisively outmaneuvered. "You talk like politics is a viral moment," she accused, her voice tight with a desperate attempt to regain control, to dismiss Karoline's impact. "Like claps and retweets or progress." Karoline didn't smile, not this time. Her expression was grave, resolute. "No," she said evenly, her voice a quiet force. "I talk like someone who's tired of being told to wait her turn." Jessica raised an eyebrow, a flicker of her old condescension returning. "That's what this is about? Impatience?" Karoline's tone sharpened, cutting through the pretense. "It's about watching people like you wrap yourselves in credentials while real people drown in bureaucracy." Jessica exhaled sharply through her nose, a sound of exasperation. "You want instant results. That's not how the system works." Karoline nodded slowly, her gaze unwavering. "Exactly, and that's the problem." For a second, the room felt like it had stopped breathing, the weight of that simple, profound statement settling over everyone. Jessica leaned in now, her voice more clipped, more desperate. "You're not the only one who's seen hardship, but screaming into a microphone doesn't fix a broken country." Karoline cocked her head slightly, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, and delivered the final devastating blow. "And whispering in back rooms hasn't fixed it either." Boom. Even the cameraman's hands seemed to tense. The host's eyes darted off stage, producers already signaling, panicking over time. But there was no cutting this off now. Viewers were glued. Jessica tried one last shot, a desperate lunge. "The world isn't as simple as you make it." Karoline stood her rhetorical ground, unyielding. "No, Jessica, you just make it complicated enough to excuse doing nothing." There it was, that final crack in the old armor. Jessica's face hardened, her jaw tight. "You think you're the future?" Karoline didn't hesitate. "No, I know I'm the wake-up call." Silence. Deafening. The kind of silence that lingers longer than words, a testament to the seismic shift that had just occurred. The host finally spoke, his voice almost a whisper. "We're out of time." But the story and the impact had already landed. Jessica may have had more experience, but Karoline, she had the momentum, and everyone felt it. The moment the host uttered, "We're out of time," no one moved. The tension in the room had solidified into something heavier, something unspoken yet undeniable. What had begun as a routine panel was now trending across social media feeds, hashtags forming before the credits could roll. Karoline sat unmoved, her expression unreadable, a picture of serene victory. Jessica, on the other hand, was visibly rattled, her jaw clenched, her hands fiddling with the same notepad she'd barely used. But the cameras were still rolling. The audience, the internet, the world, they wanted more. Jessica leaned in again, a final desperate attempt to regain some shred of dignity. "You're not the first loud voice to walk onto this stage thinking she's the revolution." Karoline didn't flinch. "No, but I might be the first one to mean it." Jessica scoffed. "What you're doing isn't revolutionary, it's reckless. You take complex issues, strip them into sound bites, and sell them as truth." Karoline's tone was quiet now, but that made it worse, sharper. "And you take broken systems, dress them up in footnotes and committee hearings, and pretend that's leadership." Boom. Jessica's retort was immediate. Do you even understand how government works? Karoline smiled, this time with teeth. Yeah, it talks a lot and fixes little. Sound familiar? A few staffers couldn't help but laugh nervously. The host shifted again, clearly regretting every choice that led to this segment. Jessica bristled. You're turning this into theater. Karoline nodded once. Better than letting it stay a funeral. And there it was. The line. The one that broke through everything. Jessica sat back, silent now. And for the first time, she didn't have a follow-up. Karoline leaned into her mic, calm as ever. You can call it naive, you can call it disrespectful, but I'll tell you what it really is. Unfiltered. And the truth is unfiltered scares you. Jessica blinked, lips parted but soundless. The host, desperate to regain control, jumped in. Thank you both, that's all for tonight. But everyone watching knew it wasn't. This moment wouldn't fade. It wouldn't disappear into the archives of another televised debate. Karoline may have had more experience, but Karoline, she had the momentum, and everyone felt it. Within hours, the clip had shattered algorithmic ceilings. Major media outlets clipped the exchange, added bold captions, and aired it on loop. Cable news anchors tried to make sense of what they'd witnessed, but most only fueled the fire. CNN aired it under the banner, Naive or Bold, Karoline Leavitt Sparks Generational Clash. Fox News simply called it The Night Karoline Leavitt Took the Gloves Off. On Capitol Hill, phones rang non-stop. Staffers for moderate Democrats were frantically rewriting social media posts. Republican strategists were quietly thrilled. Younger conservatives posted TikToks lip-syncing Karoline's lines, while even apolitical influencers shared the moment with captions like, "She said what everyone's thinking," and "This Gen Z just ate a boomer live on air." Meanwhile, Jessica's team issued a statement about elevating discourse and respecting generational differences, but it came off like damage control. Late-night shows jumped on it, using Jessica's silence after the dial-up moment as their punchline of the night. In think tanks and press rooms, analysts dissected the tone, the delivery, the power dynamics. But what no one could deny was this. Karoline Leavitt had tapped into something. Not just youth or energy, but frustration, clarity, a refusal to be patronized. Podcasts lit up, headlines buzzed, Karoline's mic drop heard round the beltway. Jessica's silence was louder than her policy points. Even some of Jessica's usual allies privately admitted she got caught flat-footed. Karoline's team knew it too. By the next morning, they'd scheduled 2 more interviews, not to explain, not to apologize, just to speak. And when one interviewer asked her, "Do you think you went too far?" Karoline smiled, camera ready as ever. "I think I didn't go far enough." 3 days later, the nation was still talking. The viral moment had evolved beyond a clip. It was now a cultural flashpoint. Cable news panels framed it as a generational referendum. Op-eds flooded major publications. Talk radio framed Karoline as the new voice of unapologetic truth, while others painted her as dangerously brash. In New York, Jessica walked silently past a row of cameras, no longer trying to defend her on-air stumble. Her team urged her to pivot, focus on policy, avoid petty clashes, but the damage lingered. Every speaking engagement she attended, every tweet she posted, someone brought up the dial-up moment. Meanwhile, Karoline leaned into the wave. She wasn't just reacting, she was owning it. At rallies, supporters chanted, "After dial-up," like it was a battle cry. Young voters who had tuned out of politics were now quoting her on Instagram. Even late-night comedians who typically mocked conservatives had to admit, she had style, she had timing, and she had nerve. Political insiders on both sides of the aisle began asking, is this just a moment or the start of a movement? But not everyone was celebrating. Veteran lawmakers privately voiced concern. "She's skipping steps," one senator mumbled in a hot mic moment. And the scary part is, it's working. Karoline, for her part, refused to soften. In a podcast interview, she was asked whether she planned her line about dial-up. She shook her head. "No, that was instinct. That was me refusing to sit there and let someone tell me I haven't earned my voice because I wasn't alive during the Cold War." That clip alone hit 8 million views. Jessica finally re-emerged on a Sunday panel, more measured, more cautious. She referenced the conversation we need to be having, but avoided direct mentions of Karoline. It didn't matter. The audience heard it. The tension hadn't vanished. It had just gone silent. And across the country, people weren't choosing sides based on party lines anymore. They were choosing based on voice. A week later, Karoline stood backstage, mic clipped to her collar, pulse steady. Outside the curtain, a sold-out auditorium buzzed, not just with supporters, but with skeptics, reporters, and plenty of eyes waiting to see if she could do it again. This wasn't cable TV, this was her own stage. A producer gave her the cue. She stepped out into the lights, her heels echoing across the floor as the crowd surged with energy. She took the podium, but didn't start with applause lines, no chest pounding, no dramatics, just that same voice, measured, confident, direct. Last week, I was called naive. And maybe that was supposed to sting. But if believing in hard truth over soft talking points is naive, then I'll wear it like a badge. Applause erupted. She didn't smile. Not yet. I was told I don't understand the system, that I haven't paid my dues, that I'm too young to speak on legacy, too new to challenge what's always been done. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze sweeping across the faces in the auditorium. Let me be crystal clear. I didn't come here to inherit this broken system. I came here to confront it. The crowd was on its feet now, a roar building. Some people still think politics is about who speaks the calmest behind closed doors. I think it's about who has the courage to say what everyone's been whispering for years. She finally smiled, a genuine, powerful smile that lit up the room. And to anyone still wondering if I belong in this conversation, just know this: you can call me whatever you want, naive, bold, reckless, radical, but the truth? I'd rather be underestimated than unnoticed. Thunderous applause. Phones recording, cameras flashing. Somewhere across town, Jessica watched from her office alone. No audience, no spotlight, just the soft hum of her phone lighting up with more people tagging her in clips, memes, and headlines that no longer included her voice. Karoline stepped back from the podium, letting the roar of the crowd carry her final words. And as the lights dimmed, one thing was unmistakably clear. The era of quiet, cautious politics was being replaced by something louder, sharper, and unignorable. You know, I've been called a lot of things lately. Naive, loud, lucky, unqualified. But here's the truth they don't want to say out loud. I didn't win that debate because I shouted louder. I won because I refused to play by the rules that were written to keep voices like mine silent. They say respect your elders. Sure, but not when they're using that age to silence accountability. Not when they hide behind experience and confuse it with entitlement. This isn't just about me. It's about every young woman who's ever been told to wait her turn, every voice that's been dismissed before it even had a chance to speak, and every person watching tonight wondering if their truth is too raw, too risky, too real. I'm here to tell you, speak anyway. Because if shaking the room makes them uncomfortable, maybe the room needed shaken. So no, I'm not sorry. Not for the words, not for the fire, not for daring to challenge someone who thought she had the floor just because she had the resume. You want polished? Look elsewhere. You want truth? I'll be right here. This story, Jessica called her naive. Karoline asked if that was before or after dial-up, is a testament to the power of authenticity and the shifting tides of influence. If you found Karoline's journey inspiring, if her words resonated with you, or if you simply enjoyed this deep dive into a pivotal moment, please like this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. And of course, subscribe for more narratives that challenge the status quo and explore the moments that change everything.